The New Orleans Saints wide receiver room might not be very big, but it's really, really fast. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the New Orleans Saints run game must thrive in 2025. Kellen Moore is kind of marching to the beat of his own drum and doesn't really care about what anybody thinks about it, and I really kind of dig it. And the New Orleans Saints wide receiver room seems to be built on one thing and one thing only, and that is speed. And I think the New Orleans Saints are very, very happy about that. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being it every day or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The New Orleans Saints have a lot of speed on their wide receiver room, in their wide receiver room. And I think Kellen Moore and the New Orleans Saints coaching staff are pretty happy about it. I think that that's going to end up kind of creating exactly what it is that they're looking for. Now, I asked Kellen Moore a little bit about this on Thursday during his final kind of bonus week media availability, and he said that they kind of just went after the talent, right? They went out, Brandin Cooks was available, so they went and got him. Trey Palmer hit waivers, so they went and claimed him. And that was more so about that. Devin Velus is a guy that they really wanted, so they went and made the trade for him. And then it was more about the player than it was about the player's speed. But I have to think that the player's speed had to do something about it, because there aren't a lot of wide receiver rooms in the NFL that are built like the New Orleans Saints wide receiver room, which is small, right? They don't have the biggest players. They have willing blockers. They have a big-bodied guy right now, of course, in Devin Velus. They add to their practice squad guys like Kevin Austin Jr. as well as Cedric Wilson, who are pretty good run blockers. Mason Tipton is a very willing run blocker, so on and so forth. But it's the speed that stands out. So before we get to why I think this is what the coaching staff wanted, let's quantify the speed a little bit for you. The New Orleans Saints right now, at the time that I'm recording this, have 6 wide receivers on their active roster. I'm going to focus on them. So no Cedric Wilson Jr., no Kevin Austin Jr., those guys on the practice squad, we'll leave them aside. There are the incumbent guys that are at the top in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Those are your 2 star guys. You have the other speedy guys on the roster in Brandin Cooks as well as Mason Tipton. And then the 2 new faces in Devin Velus, who was acquired via trade just before the 3rd preseason game against the Denver Broncos from the Denver Broncos, and then just recently picked up on waivers following roster cuts, former LSU wide receiver, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver, Trey Palmer. So let's look at the speed for each of these wide receivers, just for funsies. Chris Olave, 4.39 40-yard dash at the combine. Brandin Cooks, Trey Palmer, as well as Mason Tipton, all whether at a pro day or at the combine, 4.33 40-yard dashes. That's really fast. And then Devin Velus, acquired via trade at 6'4", 210 plus pounds, still ran a 4.47. Now the tricky part here is that Rashid Shaheed, we know, is incredibly fast. He never got to run a 40-yard dash because remember, as he was coming out of Weber State and coming into the NFL, he ended up going undrafted. And one of the big reasons why he probably went undrafted is because he never got to run that 40 time. But he did tell us in California that he ran a 10.7 100-meter dash. For those unaware, a meter is about 3.28 roughly feet, whereas a yard is 3 feet. And so with that being the case, you can get pretty close to Rashid Shaheed being somewhere roughly in the 4.28 to 4.32 range of his 40 when it comes to a 40-yard dash. And so with all of that in consideration, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver room rather is really, really, really fast. I said this during the squad show with Dylan, Lance, and John, where I talked about how fast this wide receiver room is. And I'm going to say this again in the exact same way that I said it then. I'm using the heaviest of air quotes when I say this specific word that I'm about to say, but Devon Vele is the heavy air quote, heavy air unquote, slowest receiver in the wide receiver room and still ran a 4.47. That's still a really fast guy and a really fast guy with good speed on top of that, kind of Marquez Valdez-Scantling like, you might say. And so I think that this is intentional. I don't truly believe that this is something to where they were like, oh, well, we like Brandin Cooks, we like Trey Palmer, and those guys happen to be really fast. Oh, shucks, I didn't really think about it. You don't say. I don't think that that's true. I think the New Orleans Saints absolutely were targeting speed, and I think that that makes sense. One of the things that Keith Williams, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver coach, will say all the time is that being a wide receiver in the NFL and the NFL game as a whole, particularly the passing game, is about separation. You know what can help you create separation? Being fast as all get out. You know what can help you create separation? Being able to decelerate and accelerate very quickly. You know what else helps you create acceleration? Helps you create separation. Just simply making it tough for somebody to keep pace with you. All of those things benefit from what it is that all of these New Orleans Saints receivers have done very, very well coming into the season, and that is being fast. That's it. Checkmate, if you will. It's all done when it comes to that. So here's how I think Kellen Moore has the ability to maximize this. 3 things come to mind. First of all, and this is one of the things that Trey Palmer told me on Thursday when I was in the locker room and I asked him what it was that stands out about watching Kellen Moore's offenses from before, because he had literally just gotten in like the Wednesday night, so he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to dive into the playbook just yet. But one of the things that stood out to him, or what came to mind first when I asked him what stood out to him about Kellen Moore's offenses in the past, is that he loves to air it out. So the deep ball is obviously a big part of this, right? We've already seen sort of the impact of that. We've seen Chris Olave, we've seen Rashid Shaheed, we've seen Mason Tipton all make these big plays downfield, whether it be in training camp, mini camp, preseason, whatever it might be. So the deep ball is absolutely a big part of the equation, as you would imagine when it comes to speed. But beyond that is also the lateral ability that this New Orleans Saints offense under Kellen Moore will be able to take advantage of and will look to attack with. One of the things that I first highlighted about a Kellen Moore offense that was going to look a little bit different than what the Saints have done in the past is that Kellen Moore schemes up crossing patterns really, really well. And when you can run crossing patterns that are moving from one side of the field to the opposite side of the field, as opposed to just running up the field, moving across the field makes it really, really challenging on defenders because you're forcing them into what's called a trail technique, i.e., trailing behind the wide receiver that they're covering. So either you're doing one of 2 things. In man coverage, you're forcing trail technique, which gives the quarterback an opportunity to throw to a spot or at least get the ball out in front. We used our Space Invaders reference a few weeks ago, being able to get the ball out in front so that that wide receiver can get to it. But then the other piece is that they're running through zones. And so you're able to time things up a lot more quickly because of how quickly that wide receiver is moving, get the ball to that open area. The other thing that I think will certainly be able to be taken advantage of here by Kellen Moore with the speed of these wide receivers is catch and run opportunities, or rather are catch and run opportunities, and the ability to be able to create yards after catch. So getting the ball to wide receivers in space and then letting the really fast wide receivers go out there and be exactly what they are, which is really, really fast. And so I do think that the pursuit of speed, if you will, has been very intentional by the New Orleans Saints. And so far, very successful when it comes to the wide receiver room. Now let's see if the wide receiver room and its speed can be very successful when they get out on the field, as well, as we are less than or just about a week away from some NFL Week 1 action, and I cannot wait. I am so happy. All right, coming up next, I want to take a look at a little bit more about Kellen Moore and some of the decisions that he's made, which tell me that he's carving and tracing his own path. And he ain't worried about what anybody got to say about it. We got all that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Upside. Still paying full price for gas? Well, stop it. Download the free Upside app today and start earning money back on the gas that you're already buying anyway. And as of right now, where you can get that free Upside app, you can find it over on the App Store and on Google Play, and start earning some cash back at the pump today. You can use our limited time promo code as well, Touchdown, to get you an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. Lots of folks saving up to $300, getting like $300 back per year just for viewing their usual daily commute. You can send that to your bank account. to PayPal, do e-gift cards like Amazon and other brands as well. So don't let this pass you by. Go ahead and download that free Upside app now and use that promo code touchdown for a limited time 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code touchdown. Look, offers will vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The NFL season is back. It's the best time of the year. Even with all of that and all that excitement, let's be honest, getting tickets can sometimes be a bit of a hassle between long internet queues and login screens and prices jumping up at the last second in checkout. It can be very frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that lets you take advantage of all of their great deals. I pulled up Game Time just the other day, just a couple of tabs later, you could see all the amazing deals. And I'm talking about deals to your favorite NFL teams' games for less than or as low as $100 dues. That's pretty freaking awesome. So go and check them out today. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Download Game Time today. All right, family. New Orleans Saints head coach Kellen Moore is doing his own thing, and he's having a great time doing it. I love the way that Kellen Moore has kind of come in and said, this is my team. These are my choices. This is me doing my thing, as opposed to falling into the rhythm of maybe some of the regimes in the past. We appreciate you very much for being here with us on today's episode. Just real quick, don't forget to head over to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey so you can take our listener survey. We're polling folks to get to know our listeners a little bit more. We do this kind of every year. So you can go through, talk about some of your favorite shows, some of the other Locked On programming, and even get some feedback about our advertisers as well. So go check it out over at the lockedonpodcast.com/survey website, and you'll be put up for an opportunity to win one of 10 Amazon gift cards in the process. So I think that there are several things that New Orleans Saints head coach Kellen Moore has done so far this offseason that kind of say that he's kind of trudging his own path, right? That he's kind of going about things his own way, forging his own path forward. And I think that's something that I'm very pleased to see. There were a lot of question marks when the New Orleans Saints coaching search opened, irrelevant to Kellen Moore at that time. But when the coaching search opened, there were a lot of concerns that the Saints might just kind of fall back into some old patterns, base themselves with an opportunity for familiarity to move forward and the kind of the comfort of continuity and how they might go about that. I think a lot of people looked at Darren Rizzi that way. I didn't necessarily see Darren Rizzi as fully representative of really like keeping things together and the continuity of everything. Remember, once Dennis Allen was fired and Darren Rizzi took over, he repurposed Todd Grantham away from the defensive line, promoted Brian Young to working with the defensive line, moved over Joe Woods off of effectively the DC and defensive coordinator job so that he's kind of splitting up those responsibilities with guys like Michael Hodges and Marcus Robertson and others. Like, he kind of changed a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, he even allowed players' positions to change. Isaiah Stallbird, who just made the 2025 roster as a linebacker, moved last year from linebacker to safety after Darren Rizzi took over. Cam Jordan started seeing a bunch more snaps. Chase Young started playing better. Like, there were a lot of things that actually did. Oh, yeah, he made Alvin Kamara a captain. Like, I think he was a bit of a disruptor in a really, really good way in the style of what New Orleans needed at that time. But there was some concern, right? Like, would the Saints go down the road of like some boring hire that just kind of, was a pushover and let the organization kind of run its team's decisions, like its roster decisions and things like that. And it's been so refreshing to see Kellen Moore kind of come in and say, this is mine. Like, I'm building this in my vision. And he's not just him, right? He's doing it with a really good coaching staff that's around him that he's assembled. Defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, all of that. So as I was walking through the locker room on Thursday and talking to some of the players, there were a couple of things that stood out to me. The culture was a big part of the conversation. I'll go into that here in just a moment. But the other thing was that like everyone just seems to trust this coaching staff. And I have to be honest, like when you're in locker rooms, that's not always the way that it feels. And so to be able to walk through a locker room and kind of feel this unanimous trust of the people that are the decision makers about these people, I think that's a really positive sign. Now, we'll see how things go once the Saints lose a few games or whatever, and how people start to feel around that time. Everything's all hunky-dory now because nothing's happened. But what happens when things happen, that's why the culture has to be strong. And it certainly sounds like that is the case. Several players telling me that they came back to the New Orleans Saints practice squad despite the fact that they had offers with other teams, because they enjoyed the fact that in New Orleans, they're not just treated like football players, numbers, legs, arms, and contributors on a football field. They are instead treated like human beings, that they are treated with a personal touch. And that is something that they very much enjoy from this coaching staff, and that they think is really valuable. And I thought that that was a very valuable piece of feedback, because that's a big part of the culture idea of trying to build things out for this New Orleans Saints team. This Saints team going into 2025 is not entering a 2025 as a finished product. It is entering 2025 as a work in progress. And so to hear a lot of players come in and feel all the things that a finished product feels despite being a work in progress, I think that that is a massive testament to this coaching staff and the culture, tone, identity that Kellen Moore is building. I also enjoy some of the decisions that Kellen Moore has made. He has not sat idly by while these while these offensive line injuries have ransacked this team already, right? Nick Saldiveri, season over. Will Clapp, season over. Landon Young, season over. Trevor Penning dealing with the toe injury. Barry Wesley on injured reserve, designated to return. Like, this has not been the easiest road for New Orleans Saints when it comes to their offensive line. And what did they do? They went and they traded for Awesome Richards. They went and signed, or rather claimed off of waivers, Xavier Truss, who comes in with good SEC experience as an undrafted free agent rookie coming out of Georgia. Spent a little bit of time with Denver, so I'm sure they got some good information from guys like Zach Strief and other guys that they trust over in Denver as well. And then, of course, Luke Fortner acquired in the trade with Colin Saunders from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Torricelli Simpkins has been a revelation for New Orleans. They actually have multiple backup centers all of a sudden, to where if something happens at center, you don't have to move a guard over to center. You can just move in a backup center. What a novel idea. Again, I thought that the addition of Dylan Radins has been smart since the moment that they did it, as long as they keep him on the interior. There was no just sitting around and waiting to see what was going to happen, or going to sort of the street free agents and things like that. Like, this was a team that said, I want this player, I want that player, and I want that player. 2 players acquired in a trade, another one acquired in via waivers, targeting the players that they wanted, as opposed to going and getting the players that might be available. I thought that that was something that I really, really enjoyed. I think going out there and building this wide receiver room based off of speed, clearly that's what Kellen Moore wants. That's what he's done. Picking the quarterback that was the more ready quarterback right now, as opposed to picking the quarterback that the most recent investment was made in, that is a good coaching sign. Seeing the Saints move on from previous regimes' draft picks without much ado when it comes to it, very wise. And also, again, forging your own path and not living under the shadow of what has happened before you. So I think that Kellen Moore and this New Orleans Saints coaching staff so far deserves some flowers in terms of their ability to be able to come into this situation, to begin to rebuild it already, to be able to bring together some promise, both roster-wise, coaching staff-wise, player-wise, scheme-wise, all these other pieces. But then also, beyond that, also be able to go out there and build this team the way that they want to, and build the culture that will keep them all together. Yeah, that's a really, really good start for Kellen Moore and this New Orleans Saints coaching staff. And I'm really interested to see where it takes them early, and even more interesting later in the season. Coming up next, if the New Orleans Saints want to get anywhere in 2025, running there might be the best way to go. This New Orleans Saints rushing game has to thrive in 2025. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best way to play daily fantasy football. It's you and your football knowledge being able to help you turn things into a real set of rewards. And they're helping you out along the way as well, with football season right around the corner here. Dak Prescott, 0.5, just 1/2 a passing yard, gets you a max discount there. So all you need is 1 passing yard. You're excellent. You're all set. So all you got to do, it's super simple to play. You choose 2 to 6 players and choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections. You get those right, and you could win up to 2,000 times your money back. So download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Once again, that is prizepicks.com, where you can go and get started with promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints must get their running game off the ground as early as possible during the 2025 season in order to help this team find any success throughout the year. And of course, keep itself going and its young quarterbacks developing and healthy in the process. We appreciate you being here with us. Don't forget, you can catch us every single Monday through Friday over on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network at 10 a.m. We appreciate you coming through for that. And of course, check out the rest of our Locked On Louisiana lineup, Locked On Pelicans, Locked On LSU, Locked On SEC as well. So look, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Velus Jones Jr., Devin Neal, those are the 4 running backs on your active roster. Saints right now have no running backs on their practice squad. I expect eventually for that to change. Clyde Edwards-Helaire will not be back. He is headed over to the Kansas City Chiefs. It's maybe Marcus Yarns ends up finding his way back, the Delaware legend, Blue Hen legend. Getting his opportunity maybe to come back after that point. But for the New Orleans Saints right now, those are their 4 running backs. And I think that is a good crop of running backs. To me, it feels like you have like a little bit of a square in this situation, to where at one corner at the top left, you've got Alvin Kamara. At one corner at the top right, you've got Velus Jones Jr. At one corner in the bottom left, you've got Kendre Miller. And at the opposite corner of that, you've got Devin Neal. And for me, it goes in the order of Alvin Kamara is your running back 1, Kendre Miller is your running back 2, Velus Jones Jr. and Devin Neal kind of help give you some depth. I don't really know that I would call either one RB3 and RB4. I think in any case, one could be RB3 when they're going up against maybe a slow, sluggish defense that's a little bit more kind of brute force and you want the speed guy to get around that. Well, Velus Jones Jr. can give you that. Or if you're going up against a lighter defense that uses maybe like safety hybrid type linebackers, then maybe Devin Neal, who can run through some contact, would be the best one for you. So I don't think there's really a need for a designation between RB3 and RB4 because it'll come down to game plan. But I do think that with Alvin Kamara, if you go to the opposite corner on, at the top, you keep with somebody that has all of these versatile skill sets that can line up in the slot, line up at wide receiver, that you can throw to out of the backfield, that has great speed, that can run option routes, and that can also run the football and get outside the tackles in particular. That's what Velus Jones Jr. brings you. Then you go to the opposite corner below, and then that's where you get a different style of player. And that's where you get the more physical guys in Kendre Miller, as well as diagonally across, you end up with a guy like Devin Neal. And both of those players give you guys that can run in between the tackles, that can get outside, that can protect the passer. And in Devin Neal's case, very good as a receiver. Kendre Miller has continued to develop as a receiver. And so I kind of like the fact that you have these 4 running backs that can all overlap, but that are also, or can all overlap in certain areas with one another, but are also so different and unique and have the ability to be able to kind of be something unique, something different, something specific. And there's no player in this running back room outside of Alvin Kamara that's more unique and specific to me than Velus Jones Jr. We talked about the speed of the wide receiver room earlier today. You had some 4.33s, you had some 4.39s, all that other stuff. Velus Jones Jr. is looking at those numbers and laughing because he's got a 4.31 40 under his belt. This dude is ridiculously fast. And he has the ability to be able to contribute to you as a returner, both in the punt return game and in the kick return game. An absolute speed guy. And that's something that the Saints haven't really had in their wide running back room for a long time. Like, really, you got to go all the way back to CJ Spiller and Darren Sproles before that, before you really find those speed wide receivers. And I don't mean guys that were fast. Like, Alvin Kamara's got better speed than people are willing to give him credit for, but ain't nobody sniffing where Velus Jones Jr. is when it comes to the speed side of this conversation. And so he brings something specific and unique to that running back room and that backfield that nobody else brings. Devin Neal brings you something specific because of his ability to be able to be versatile as an inside-outside runner. Kendre Miller brings you something unique and specific as a guy that can run through contact, force missed tackles, and go and pick up yards after he's broken those tackles. And then Alvin Kamara brings you something very unique by being Alvin Kamara and the fact that he can do literally anything on the roster that you need him to over on the offensive side of the football. And so I think there's some unique things that you can do with this running back room. I'd be interested to see how you utilize them in some, different situations, utilizing sort of the play action waggle opportunities where you have 2 play actions and maybe dump one off to one of those guys, utilizing them in wildcat, utilizing them in jet sweeps, utilizing them in end arounds. Like there's just so many unique things you could do. And that's only, all of those are examples of what they would do is with running the football, not necessarily all the things you could do with them as receivers, right? Like allowing guys like Alvin Kamara and Velus Jones Jr. to be able to run those option routes where if they see the outside leverage as they get to the break for the top of their route, and they see a linebacker give that outside leverage or a safety give that outside leverage, and they cut back inside to the middle of the field on an angle route or that Texas route, or that linebacker or safety has the inside leverage, so they bounce out towards the sideline, giving your quarterback an easy 3 couple of yards. Like I look at those short passing game areas as an extension of the run game, and the amount of pressure you can take off of your young quarterbacks by being able to, or young quarterback, excuse me, now that we're out of the battle, I don't have to say quarterbacks anymore, but out of the young quarterback here in Spencer Rattler to start the season, having guys that you can throw the football to 3 yards away, 5 yards away, and allow them to go and pick up yards after the catch, or turn around and hand the ball off and allow them to go and get those yards. That takes so much pressure off of what you're trying to do as an offense. It takes so much pressure off of what you're trying to do as a young wide receiver, or excuse me, as a young quarterback. This running back has to thrive. Running back room has to thrive in 2025. And I think they've got the unique set of talent, skill sets, overlapping, and uniqueness to be able to do it. All right, coming up in our next episode on Monday, we'll get you caught up with everything you need to know around your New Orleans Saints, perhaps some more roster moves on the way. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.